For over 40 years, this has been a conflict fought almost entirely in the shadows. But now, the rivalry between Iran and Israel is breaking out into the open, and the stakes just couldn't be higher. So in this explainer, we're going to break down how we got here and what it all means for the world.
Just think about that for a second. It's a question that, used to be purely hypothetical, something for diplomats and military strategists to debate, but lately it's become a terrifyingly real possibility.
And we're not talking about illustrations anymore. We have actually seen direct, state-on-state attacks like this, completely shattering decades of unwritten rules about how this fight was supposed to be fought.
Yeah, swarms of drones lighting up the darkness. This is what it looks like when a conflict that's been simmering for decades suddenly boils over into a direct and open confrontation.
So, how in the world did we get here? How did a 40-year rivalry reach this critical boiling point? That is the real question, right? And to understand what's happening now, we've got to rewind the clock and go back to the very beginning.
And where we start? Well, it's a chapter of this story that's probably going to surprise you, because the relationship between these two countries looked completely different once upon a time.
I know, it's hard to even picture it now, but yes, Iran and Israel were once allies. And I don't just mean they were friendly, they were strategic partners. We're talking shared intelligence, Iran selling oil to Israel, Israeli advisors training Iranian forces. It was a real alliance. And you have to understand this forgotten history to really grasp how dramatic the change has been.
You can basically split this relationship into two completely opposite eras. Before 1979, you had cooperation, partnership, all driven by a shared distrust of their powerful Arab neighbors. But after 1979, total adversaries. It's a complete 180. So, what on earth happened in that one single pivotal year?
Well, that year was 1979. The Islamic Revolution in Iran wasn't just a change of government. It completely rewired the country's entire worldview. The new regime, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, basically defined itself by being against the West and its allies. So out went the Shah's pro-American stance, and in came this new ideology that branded Israel an illegitimate Zionist entity. All ties were severed, just like that. And Israel went from partner to enemy overnight.
Okay, so with that dramatic break, the relationship entered a whole new phase. It wasn't defined by open war, but by something much more subtle and, well, a lot more complex.
And this is where we get into what's called the shadow war. See, a direct all-out war was just seen as way too destructive for both sides. So instead, they chose to fight indirectly, using proxies, spies, and covert methods to attack each other across the region.
So Iran's main strategy here was to build a network of what are called proxies. These are allied groups that it could fund, arm, and train to fight on its behalf. And the big ones you always hear about are Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. The whole goal was to create this kind of ring of fire, using these groups to put constant military pressure right on Israel's borders. In response, Israel's strategy has been to relentlessly push back and counter that influence. This has reportedly involved hundreds of airstrikes to stop Iran from getting a military foothold in Syria, really sophisticated cyber attacks on Iranian infrastructure, and, these covert operations, including the alleged assassinations of key scientists in Iran's nuclear program.
And for decades, this back and forth, this shadow war, that was the status quo. It was a dangerous game, but it had rules. But recently, something fundamental changed. The conflict has started to step out of the shadows and right into the open.
Yeah, those unwritten rules, they got shattered. For the very first time, Iran launched a direct missile and drone attack on Israeli territory. Israel, of course, responded. These tit-for-tat exchanges, they've kicked off a brand new and much more dangerous chapter in this story.
So the key takeaway here is pretty clear. That buffer, that safety net of fighting through other groups, is gone. We've now moved into an era of direct state-on-state confrontation, and that just raises the stakes for the entire region big time.
But, these direct strikes explain how things escalated so quickly. But what's the core issue here? What's the one thing that's really driving this conflict to such an incredibly dangerous level?
Well, the answer really comes down to one thing: Iran's nuclear program. This is the issue that, more than anything else, has the potential to turn this whole rivalry into a full-blown war. And you have to understand, from Israel's perspective, a nuclear-armed Iran isn't just another strategic problem. They see it as an existential threat. And what that means is, they see it as a threat to the very survival of their country. It's that serious. And this is where you get the standoff, because the two positions just can't be reconciled. Iran insists its program is only for peaceful energy, but Israel is absolutely convinced that Iran's real goal is a nuclear weapon, and they've made it crystal clear they will do whatever it takes to stop that from happening.
Okay, so that's the history, and that's the core tension. But why should someone living thousands of miles away care about this? Why does this regional rivalry matter to the rest of us? Well, because the stakes are truly global.
And here's the crucial point. A war between Iran and Israel would be like throwing a massive rock into a pond. The ripples wouldn't just stay in one place. The Middle East is so deeply interconnected, and it's such a vital hub for the global economy, that a conflict there would never stay contained.
And when you start thinking about the potential chain reaction, it's pretty terrifying. A wider war could easily pull in neighboring countries. Then you've got global powers like the US being drawn in. It would almost certainly disrupt global oil markets, and you know what that means for prices everywhere. And it could just trigger mass destabilization across the entire Middle East.
And that is exactly why you see all this frantic diplomatic activity going on behind the scenes. The international community, they get it. They understand the catastrophic potential here, and they're working like crazy to try and pull both sides back from the brink. So that's where we are today. A 40-year journey from unlikely partners to bitter rivals, now standing right on the edge of an all-out war. The final question, the one everyone is asking, is whether diplomacy can actually pull them back from that brink. Or will this 40-year shadow war finally erupt into a full-scale conflict? Right now, that question remains unanswered. And the entire world is watching and waiting to see what happens next.